Think Outside the Lines is a space for anyone ready to stop checking boxes, to step off autopilot, and create the life you actually want, with clarity, intention, and alignment. Whether you're questioning the default path, rebuilding from scratch, or just looking to feel a little more like yourself. My guest today had a life that looked lovely from the outside. A growing business, 3 kids, a home, a marriage. She walked away from it anyway. In this conversation, we talk about what it costs to keep up appearances, what it takes to finally let go, and what she's discovering on the other side of the picture she thought she was supposed to have. She's learning, slowly and imperfectly, to stop reaching for what's next and actually be here for what's now. Join me as we think outside the lines with Mariah Sheridan. Mariah, you've described a life that looks very lovely from the outside, a successful business, 3 kids, a home, a marriage people seemingly admired. And then you made the choice to walk away from it. Tell me a bit about your journey.
First off, one of the things that you just said, and thanks for having me, Sean, was that after I made this move to leave my marriage and change my life, it gave me a whole new respect for all the people out there that have done this. There's something to be said for giving something a go for a couple of decades and then deciding that it wasn't the right thing anymore. That was the hardest thing I'd ever done, right?
Yeah.
It was interesting to have people say to me afterwards, like, oh, everything looked so great. You know, your social media looked so lovely. And I was always envious of the trips you guys were taking, but it's different on the side, right? It's different when you're going through it and you're living it, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I started out in a pretty, I guess you'd say, tumultuous upbringing, and kind of just clawed my way out of the town I grew up in and got myself off to university after lots of struggles with my family and my parents, with addiction and mental health stuff. Both of my parents struggle with both of those things respectively. And I just knew I needed to look out for myself. That was something I learned at a pretty young age as a young teenager, was that I had to make sure I was looking out for me because no one else had. Try as they might, right? Parents love you as best they can, but when they're dealing with their own struggles, everybody's still just a human dealing with their own struggles, and you're the person who's going to make sure you're okay. If you don't make that a priority, who else is going to make that a priority? I learned that pretty early on. I had a string of pretty terrible relationships through high school and into university with just all the crap that so you could have dealt your way. It feels like I had dealt my way. I just kept going. What else can you do but just keep going, right? And I ended up, I finished school and I ended up in a really small, little, lovely town in the Rockies, and I ended up meeting what ended up being my husband in this town, and was like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to have babies and have a white picket fence and do all the things. And of course, life is never how you expect it to be. The paint of your life is always going to be a 2-dimensional picture, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're living it, it is anything but.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question? Because it was fascinating as you said that, because we talk a lot about like the white picket fence and the dream, right? The kids and the dogs and all that. Was that your dream, or do you feel like that was a dream that society pressed upon you very early?
Oh, it was my dream, because growing up, all I ever wanted to be was normal. So growing up in a household with parents who smoked pot long before it was ever legal anywhere, I always felt I carried this really heavy weight of fear all the way through my childhood. And it was something I could never talk about with anyone. I couldn't talk with my friends, and it felt like this terrible, dirty secret. Now I realize, of course, especially once I got a little bit older, I realized my parents' lives weren't the way they were just because they smoked pot. There was a lot of other things.
Sure.
But as a kid, that's all I knew, right? That my parents smoked pot, and it was a big secret, and I shouldn't talk about it to anybody. And
that's so fascinating. So your fear was that maybe they could be arrested or taken from you? Yeah. Is that interesting? Okay.
Yeah, that my parents would go to jail, right? And that it certainly wasn't going to be me that made it happen. So it was it's funny when I look back on it, or especially the way society's changed now, that pot is legal in lots of places and it's not a big deal. And heck, I smoke pot, but
Well, it's funny. It's funny too, because I hear what you say about everyone is doing the best they can, especially parents that are raising kids, right? I think that's grace that we try to give anyone that's raising a child. But I look at that too as, okay, but knowing what we know now about how, I don't know if you've ever had that conversation with them about, this is a fear that you basically unknowingly even instilled in me that I carried throughout my life as a child. I don't know if we could just be more open with our kids as they're growing up. You know what I mean? To like not, that makes me so sad for you, because I think we all have some version of that, right? But would they have still done that had they known, right? That's always a big question mark. Maybe the answer is yes. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's something that for me, so when I imagined this white picket fence life, when that image came when I was little,
Yeah.
I remember knowing that it was like, I want to be a fun, relaxed adult and a parent, but I'm never going to do drugs, and it was very black or white to me.
Yeah.
Because when you're a kid, how can there be anything else? All there is black and white, right and wrong, yes and no, what you will do and what you won't do. And then as life went on, when I was a teenager, it's funny, we're on to such a topic of marijuana, like it's that big of a deal.
Right.
I smoked pot a little bit here and there. And then once it became legal and there was less of a stigma around it, and honestly, really, truly is that once things were really shitty in my marriage, I started smoking more pot myself, but it was always a secret. I didn't want my kids to carry that because of what I went through. So my pot smoking was like after I put the kids to bed, because I also don't like the idea of parenting my kids if I'm high or stoned or whatever word you use. Because that.
And I appreciate your sensitivity around that. And I think too, we're using pot in this situation, but I look at alcohol probably as a more common thing that exists in parents, right? And I see typically you see it go one of two ways. You either see kids that grow up and they are so far, they completely avoid alcohol because that's how they grew up. Or it goes the opposite direction, right? And they become alcoholics themselves.
Yeah.
So I think having that awareness in your particular situation around, this was my experience as a kid going through this with parents that did it. So I'm going to hide it from my children for different reasons though, right?
Yeah. And it was like, put the kids to bed and then be in my ensuite bathroom window, out the window like a teenager. Because I was dying for some sort of, things were shitty in our lives. And I was working so hard to just doing the treading water, like the duck underwater with my feet.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, all I wanted to do was numb out. But the last thing I wanted my kids to do was carry the weight of worrying about this like I did. So I was like, it was a big secret. Until then, my older girls got to be a bit older and you think you put everybody to bed, but when you have a 13-year-old, they're not really in bed. They're going to come back and talk to you or whatever. So then it became a conversation though, and an open conversation, because that was important to me. And to say to my
kids are so much smarter than you give them credit for too, right? We don't remember how smart we were at 13 or 14 or whatever. And it's like, and I think there's an inner knowing, right? Especially if you have parents that are fighting or parents that are whatever, right? It's inherent.
And lots of kids are like little detectives. I was this way too, where if I think you're hiding something, I'm going to do everything I can to figure out what it is. So it just became an open conversation. And like you said, comparing it to drinking, I'm not a huge drinker. I don't drink the casual beverages that people drink. So I'm not a beer drinker and I'm not a wine drinker. So I'm not going to be like, pour me a vodka. I'm not a big drinker, because if I am drinking, I'm drinking. And explaining to my kids, it's the same as lots of families where a parent might have a couple of glasses of wine after dinner. I was like, this is a strange turn this took, Sean. I had no idea.
Right. You know what? I love when it goes in that direction though. Let's get back to, because you talked about ending your marriage, right? And you called it the hardest thing you've ever done. What made it hard? Was it the decision itself, or was it everything that you knew would come after?
Oh my God. I had no idea what was going to happen afterwards, or at least I thought maybe I had an idea, and it was the hardest thing because I just had been trying. It was probably done for 10 years before it was done. We just keep trying. We have 3 children together, and I wanted to just do it all right.
The white picket fence, right? Happy ever after.
Yeah. Happy ever after. And there was lots of parts of it that were great. Actually, there was quite a few people when I first ended it had a really tough time, because I would say, you know what, my husband's a great guy. He has so many great qualities. I love him. I just don't want to be married to him anymore. And there were some people that were in a really tough time with me taking that stance. But I knew that it was the best thing for me. And one of my daughters and I were just talking about this the other day, and I'd said, I'm sorry. We just had a bit of a mishap that happened, stuff back and forth within our family. And I apologize. Because something was said, and let me retract that. I'm just like, I don't want to sit in here and slam my ex-husband.
No, totally. And that's not the intention, obviously.
There was some blame. None of this would be this way if your mom hadn't ended our marriage, or so, like a comment like that. And then it was like, whew, okay. Yeah. Like, that's not the first time I've heard that, for sure. But then saying to my daughter, I'm sorry. I was trying for a long time, and I'm sorry that I did this thing that made it feel shitty for everyone else, but I couldn't keep doing it. And one of the deciding factors for me when I did pull the plug was that if my if I knew that my daughters, I have 3 girls, right? If I knew that any one of my daughters were in a marriage like this when they're adults and they were as unhappy deep down as I was, I would never want them to stick it out for anyone, right? And so that was my decision making for me too, was like, no, I don't want that. I wouldn't want this for them. So why would I do it to myself?
I think that hearing you say something like that out loud is so powerful, because I wonder how many people feel that way, but are not actually brave enough to maybe take that action, right? Because it's so much easier to stay, and I use that term loosely, right? To stay in something because you have the veneer, right, that people see, and you don't want to upset the kids. You don't want to hear your ex-spouse say things about you to your kids, right? So it's easier to just avoid all that entirely and stay in something that you're unhappy in. And so I'm always in admiration of someone that says, I did it for me, but I also did it because I'm an example to my children, who I wouldn't want them to be in that relationship later in their lives, right? And I think that's so big.
Yeah. And I hope that they can look at it that way when they're older and not just feel resentful, but I think they get it. My girls and I are open with one another to a fault. In fact, that's something that I've really struggled with, is that my girls used to get bugged at school because if any of their friends told them a secret that was like someone was in danger or somebody was doing something they really shouldn't do, my girls would tell me. And then I learned after pissing too many people off that then I would, well-meaning, go to the parent, if I knew the parent, and be like, hey, I think this might be happening. And then, of course, it would blow up. So that happened maybe half a dozen times. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to try to help anybody. Everybody's just doing their own thing. But my kids ended up with a bit of a reputation for talking to me too much about things. And then having it be like, you can't tell these girls a secret. They always tell their mom. So we have this there's a lot of conversation and dialogue with my girls and I. We talk about, we all feel like, oh yeah, I talk so much with my kids, but I've worked so hard to make sure it's next level with my girls. But then in turn, as I was going to say but that's so not right. As I walk through this divorce, it is so difficult to just zip my lip and not talk about it, because the girls and I are so open and close that I'm like, okay, I am failing at this. Like, the big thing is don't let your kids know what's going on. They shouldn't know about anything. Everything should just be hush hush. And it's like, I don't ever hear anybody say, hey, I'm fucking this up. This is going terribly. No one ever says that. And something I've always tried to do, at least in my adult life, is if I'm really struggling with something, I share it. Because I think if we can normalize things that are shitty and someone else can hear you say it, then you can spend less time worrying about the fact that you're the only person that's fucking this up, right?
That's why I have these conversations and I make them public in a podcast format, right? Because I think that, and the topics can vary, right? Like today where a part of our conversation is about relationships, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's leaving a job, or the idea is that there is someone that is as, if not more, unhappy than you are or uncomfortable than you are in their current state. And I want people to hear that, because there's a positive outcome on the other side of that if you're willing to be uncomfortable through it, right? That's the thesis of these conversations. So I love everything you're saying.
Thank you.
I think too, like, I think it's really important, because you mentioned something that kind of like, it made me reflect on like my growing up, because I grew up like a gay kid in Orange County, California, where it was like super conservative, right? And that was something that you just didn't talk about. And I think about, that was a secret that I had that I couldn't tell anyone, but I had friends that did know. And one of them, a close girlfriend of mine, did tell her mom. And I was so terrified of that, right? Because it's, oh my God, she's going to tell my parents. But actually what it did, and this is why I kind of loved what you said, because you're just like, I'm going to still have that close relationship with my girls, because I wish that I had a mom. I did end up having a mom like you that reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're going through this. I know it's hard. I'm here for you. And that meant so much to me at that time. So I think that it's beautiful that you have that relationship with your girls. And I'm sure that it's really challenging to not be able to talk about your marriage with them, and because it's their dad, right? And that's a whole boundary that it's like, how do I even begin to navigate that? But I think the rest of it is beautiful, and don't change that about your parenting, please, because I think it's a good thing.
It's probably impossible. I don't think I could change it.
Totally.
Too far in it now.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap up like the relationship aspect of things, do you feel like you're in a place where you're at peace with your decision, even regardless of the mess? Or is it something you're still kind of working through?
Yeah, no, I was at peace with the decision before I even said it out loud. I've heard this a lot now since I did it, is that most women, when they announce that they're done in their marriage, they've been done for a while. And for me, I didn't know I was done until just probably a couple of weeks before. And I had been kind of sitting with it in a new way. I'd been off and on feeling like I was done, as in, I can't take this anymore. I've been bad for a few years. But then it was like a quiet knowing, oh, yeah, this is it. And I had a couple weeks after that. And then the day that I did it, I actually had some kind of physical stuff that was happening to me. And I had oh my gosh, this is what happens when you hold a terrible knowing inside of you and you don't live your truth.
Yeah.
Shit, I have to do something about this. And then so I said it out loud. And saying it out loud was, I am a person of many words. And I talked to my husband about it, and then later in the evening, the kids could see that he was visibly upset, although they didn't know anything at that point. And I knew as soon as we were in private, they were just going to ask me anyways what was wrong. So I just called us all into a room, sat down. So that was quicker than I intended. I didn't intend on telling my kids this very same day. I told my husband, but like I said, they could see he was upset, and I knew they were going to start asking me questions.
Yeah. And
when I sat everybody down, I must say that I've never had words catch in my throat. I've never experienced anything so difficult as having those words come out of my mouth to my kids. It was shitty. But within a short amount of time, my husband was upset. He left and went for a walk. The girls all went off to their bedrooms. I talked to them individually, and then I brought them back to the living room with just me because he was gone. And we talked about what this was going to look like and what this would mean. And it's just this open dialogue that I don't know any other way to be. So that's the way it is. But to answer your question, I knew it was the right thing to do for me. There wasn't much really in moments of, is this the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? He really put a major effort in for about 4 months after I said that we were done. And I could see how hard he was trying. And I would say, you know what, I love you and I care about you and I'm not opposed to us coming back together, but this is not months down the road, it's years down the road. I had been working on myself and done so much work and had been in so much therapy and did so much writing and all the things. And I just felt like I was just I'd headed off in a different path. And if he wanted to join me and we were going to reconvene, okay, I'm not opposed to that, but it's not like you're going to do a couple months of some inner work and then we're just going to, it's all going to be okay. And it didn't take long, to be honest. Thank God I didn't go back on what I felt was right, because within 4 months, it all went to shit. And then it was even more so of, oh yeah, this was the right thing to do. This is who I was actually dealing with, is this angry person. But
one of the things that I always think about, whether it's been like the dissolution of personal relationship that I'm a part of or observing other people, is always, do you feel like there was a point where you identified like, okay, we're not communicating? Like when you look back and you can say, this is where it branched off and I started to know that this was not going to be something that worked anymore? Or do you feel that, because I think there's that, and I also think that sometimes it just compounds the day-to-day minutia of life, causes it to compound, and then you're like, fuck, we just don't like each other.
Yeah, I would say that my marriage, to be honest, for me, my marriage from the very beginning didn't ever feel super easy. We were dating, and then I actually called for a break because I wasn't sure that this was the right thing. And then
interesting. Were the things during the break things that you look back and you're like, oh, if I'd only paid more attention then?
I can share this. So I'm in the midst of editing a memoir that I wrote, and my memoir is journal entries, and then me with my now voice inserting my reflections.
Love that.
And I'm like, all the poor guy. I'm sure he'll never listen to this. He doesn't want to hear me talk. All the red flags in those journal entries, the things that were bothering me, but they just seem small, right? When someone's a good person and you really like them and they're really good to you and they're kind and generous and patient and all the things, you ignore the things that are actually important, but maybe not super important right now, but because they compound. Like you said, they compound over time. We'd been together for about 9 months and I wasn't sure this was the right thing for me. I wasn't sure it was the right relationship. So I called for a break. And then I realized I was about to lose out on this really great guy, because he really is a great guy. He really is a great guy.
Yeah.
Say it again, Mariah.
So here's the thing though, pause there for just a second, because I believe, and I really do, because I was having this conversation yesterday with a friend about the difference between liking and loving someone, and do you need both in order to make a marriage work, right? Or a long-term relationship work? I think the answer is yes, because I've loved people before, but not really liked them at the end of the day, and vice versa, right? But what you're talking about in your description is I'm hearing there were red flags, but there was love there. There were feelings that you were
Yeah.
cultivating that you loved about this person, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that in the case of, for your situation, of course, it's maybe tumultuous and acrimonious and whatever right now, but there was something there that made you want to at least go back after that break
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have children with this person, right? And I think that's the thing that I always try to tell people is you have to honor that part of the relationship, even though right now it might be messy and disgusting and whatever, but that wasn't not real, right?
Yes.
That part of it.
Absolutely. And you know what? When things went bad for us after so after I'd ended things and things were good for about 4 months of us just working together with the team and getting through it. And then when it went bad, I don't really know exactly what happened that made the switch happen. I know of a couple of little things, but one of those things was I'd printed the first draft of my memoir. And my memoir just brings me up to 25 when I get pregnant with my first daughter. And to round back to that other part was that I called for the break, we got back together, and then very quickly we got pregnant without intending to get pregnant. So we had a surprise. And then it was like, okay, we're doing this. And then we built our lives together. So when I was finishing up writing the end of my story, which brings me to 25, I'd been with him for about a year or so, a year and a half. We hadn't been together that long. And now we're pregnant and we're going to have a baby. That was the end of my memoir. And I was writing that part when I was ending my marriage. So I wasn't writing it with as much love as could be there, like you said, because you forget parts.
Yeah.
And I had printed a first draft of it. I'd sent it off to a few close friends to kind of give it a first round of reading. And there was a copy of it in my bedroom closet. And I was away on a trip and he helped himself to read it. But didn't read the whole thing, just read the end that he was in. Fair.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And when he read the parts that I'd written about him, I hadn't written anything bad because this was like I was still telling our story at the beginning of our story, but I wasn't writing it with a whole lot of love because I was just in the midst of ending the marriage, right? Weird timing. And one of the things when things turned crappy between us is he had told me, I read the end of your memoir, the parts where I'm in, and it sounds like you never even loved me.
Oh, wow.
And oh my God. So I've gone back and revised it and did what you said. It's like I pulled up more of those memories. Yeah, there was lots of things. I adored him. He really was a great guy. And those red flags, it's not like they weren't red flags like he hits when he's mad or goes out with other women. They weren't that. They were like
they were red flags to you, right? They were just things that
flags to me.
made you pause.
Yeah, things that matter long term. When you're a goal getter. When you're like, what am I doing next? How do I mount this next mountain? Whatever you want to say. I don't know. That's me. And over time, being with someone who is like the opposite of that actually was what, and to many people, that might sound like the most ridiculous reason ever to end a marriage. That's not even as I'm saying it, I'm like, but I still know what it felt like for me on the inside and what I needed to do for myself.
Yeah. And I think too I'm seeing the story where he finds your memoir, he finds the manuscript for your memoir, right? And he's reading that part and then he doesn't communicate. It reminds me of this whole story, just reminds me so much about the importance of communication, of good communication, right? Because if in that moment he had said, oh, I found your memoir and read part of it, you could have prevented probably a lot of grieving on his part, right? Where you just said, oh, hey, this is not, you didn't read the whole thing. It's even been a small snapshot, but that small snapshot was probably causing him to be like more angry toward you and have more hostility toward you. And if we would just do a better job as humans to communicate with each other, we wouldn't find ourselves in these situations and I don't know. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think, and how hurt if we put ourselves in his shoes, how much that may have hurt if you read it and didn't just took it at face value of like,
or have the context.
Yeah. And what that would have felt like. And one of the things, and he had said to me afterwards, he said, I feel like you never even loved me. And it was like, oh, damn. And yes, absolutely. I loved him. I can still appreciate now I hope that the anger that he has and the resentment towards me can like process and dissipate a little bit because he has so many great qualities and I want our kids to be able to experience those parts of him too. Right. But the communication thing is hard. And it was wild, actually. We were not okay. It started in March of last year, March of 2025. And so we were garbage all the way through until December 2025. and we had to have some conversations about kids' report cards and stuff. And we connected and had an in-person conversation, and we were together for probably 2.5 hours. And it was, he had just come back from a trip, and I think maybe he'd had a little bit of a cracked open, something had shifted in him. And this conversation, we sat together in a coffee shop, and it was like, it felt like neither of us wanted to leave. I wasn't going back in my mind if I still knew what I was doing was right, but it was like, oh, this person, yes, this is okay. We're communicating. We're talking about our kids. We're sorting things out. We're talking through some of this shitty stuff that had just happened. And I was like, oh, we're going to be all right. It lasted for about a month, and then it all went back to shitting.
Yeah.
But it was a reminder of, okay, we can do this. We can be a great team.
Well, and I think it's a reminder for you as someone you've done this work, right, to get to that place where you could even sit there and feel that way in that 2-hour period, right? And I think that it's a reminder of like, this is how I look at it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but next time things do get bad, right, you can go back to that place where you were reminded of, no, this is the person that exists beneath the pain and the hurt and all of that, right? I think I always look at it like, where's the work in this for me and my point of view on things, right? Because that person's going to be on their own journey regardless, and you wish them the best, but how can I show up better? What can I take out of the situation for me? Maybe that's a selfish perspective, but that's how I try to see life.
And it's how I more mornings than not, I get up early and make a tea and sit with my journal and write. And that's so much of what there's probably more pages in my journal about my husband across the last 20 years than, for sure, more than anyone else other than myself, right? But it's me trying to process and like, one of the things I've realized when we were married, I read the book Codependent No More.
Yeah.
Do you know the book?
It's a good book. It's a good book.
Yeah. And then just a few months ago, I listened to it on audio and had these are the parts where I made this wrong or worse, or it didn't work, right? And it's that hyper focus on all the things the other person's not doing right or what they're not bringing to the table. And it's, but how can you putting too much focus on anyone is going to make a relationship deteriorate when you're focused on someone. And my girls and I have talked about that too, because I am like anti-monogamous relationship at this point in my life. And I was saying to one of my daughters was like, if I decide to be with someone else, like totally exclusively do life with someone, live with someone, or get married to someone, they're like an extension of me and I'm an extension of them. And I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention to, did you start smoking? Are you eating like shit? Are you just watching endless YouTube videos? And it's not like I'm like beaking all the time or anything, but just I'm aware of it. And it's, that's not good for you. Like I'm aware because that person is a part of me and I'm part of them. And it's a thing. Whereas if I have someone in my life and I keep a little bit of a distance to keep myself safe, this is all about keeping myself safe. I'm realizing
totally. Yeah. No, it's true.
When they're doing something for their health or their well-being that I think is like terrible, I can maybe give a little bit of input. And then when they disregard it, I can say whatever and just turn and walk away because they're not an extension of me. Right. And that's something I've learned about my own codependency on whoever I with.
Yeah. Another way that I like to look at it too. So like I grew up hating the word partner because I felt like gay people would always introduce their person as their partner. And I was like, what, are you in a law firm together? What's happening? And I felt like it always minimized the idea of like your love for the person. Right.
Okay.
But what I've come to realize now that I actually am in a healthy relationship in my life, I love saying the word partner because it really is a partnership. And I feel like what you're describing, especially when there's children, we don't have children, but when there are children involved, I feel like it's even more of a partnership, right? And what that means is like all those things that you listed about, oh, you smoke or this or that. Is that congruent with the type of partnership I want to be in with someone, right? And so I've come to have an affection for that word in ways that I didn't used to, because that is how I see our relationship dynamic. It's we are in this together. We're building this life together as a partnership. And the decisions that we make need to like be congruent with that.
Yeah. I really like that. And both people on your own in your own entity, as you're both giving 100% to your life, is that then you're coming together in your partnership and it's just making a big, solid, beautiful partnership together, right?
Yes.
But when one person's like rowing the boat and the other person's like getting water from the lake and putting it in the boat.
It's not a partnership. Totally. Right. And that's happening in so many. And so now I'm starting to see more straight relationships use that term. And I feel like it's because they get it. That sentiment is becoming more of a thing. And I think that's how, especially, I don't know how old you are, but my generation, I feel like we've been through so many shitty relationships, but it was so good because we were able to discard all the things that we didn't want, which is what our parents and the generations before really didn't do, right? They just kind of, to your point earlier, they stayed and we're like, no, I actually don't have to stay in that. And it's actually okay if I'm by myself. And it's actually okay if I have a partner. And so I love that that's how we just that's how we approach relationships. It's, I want to be here. It's not because I have to be or because I can't leave.
Yeah. And that was a tricky thing too. When I first ended things, I had quite a few female friends and acquaintances quietly say to me that they could relate to my position, but they didn't feel like they were in a situation financially that they could make a move. And that's huge. That is everywhere, right? And that was all walks of life. That wasn't like just a stay-at-home mom that's at that. That's like a full-time teacher or this. People that have real decent paying jobs are feeling the idea of being scared of being on their own. And that for me too, like I sell real estate. I do all right, but it is still a whole other ball game when you have children and now you're paying to live all by yourself.
I mean, it's expensive. The world is expensive in ways that it wasn't even 10, 20 years ago, right? I love this conversation so much because it's conversations like this, I think, are helpful to people. I just think that relationships are like the most complicated aspect of our lives. And I think it's the one thing that nobody really knows how to navigate. We can sit here and try to have an intellectual conversation about it, but the reality is we're all just doing our best. We're all just trying every day.
And like everything else, it's so individual, right? There's no two relationships that are the same and everyone's so different.
But there are universal principles. And I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now is stuff that it's relatable. And so you can take what you need from it, right? So you're like, oh, I actually never thought maybe I could approach it this way or whatever. And that's why I think that all conversations on this topic can be important. But let's talk about right now. Here you are, present day. Is there anything in this new version of you that maybe feels like it doesn't quite fit? Is there stuff that you're still working through? Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I am. When I expected more, I'm always expecting more from myself. I expected more from myself after I made this change in my life. I had a few girlfriends early on say, I can't wait to see what you're going to do, because there was this idea that I was being held back. I was being really supported. I was supported in a lot of ways, but I was always the engine that was moving things forward. And that takes a lot to carry a family of 4 other people behind you. Yeah. And so there was this idea that after I did this, I was going to be like I was training with one of those parachutes on my back. And then you just released the parachute off my back and I was just going to go do all the things. And then I'm just like looking around over a year later going, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
I expected like some amazing magical thing to happen. I've learned how to do things by myself that I didn't ever realize that I was waiting for someone else, my partner, to take care of. Things that over time grew into annoying issues when really I could have just went and found the crazy glue and fixed that thing myself. Instead of leaving it on the counter for 4 months and grumbling about it, or changing the battery in something or the light bulb in something. I sound like an ass, but these are things that in my mind, in my marriage mind, I did these things and you do those things. But when you don't do those things, I'm annoyed. And now that I'm on my own, I'm like, oh, I can just do it. It sounds so ridiculous, but it's very real. And so that part of it has been a neat learning. I'm in a strange holding pattern right now because it's been shitty and we're back and forth with lawyers and all that sort of stuff. So I'm still in a holding pattern. I live in a rental, which is mind boggling when you sell real estate.
That's such a real, to just pause there for a second. I think I know so many people that have gone through divorces in particular. That's a real thing where the purgatory is real because you can't really even spend money because you don't know if it's going to be your money or his money or whatever, right? And so I don't know, that's a conversation that happens enough in our society of people that are going through divorce. That purgatory is real.
Is it ever? And so sometimes I get into a shitty headspace about it. And then other times I'm like, okay, just put your head down, do your work, get your stuff done, make as much money as you can. Be a good mom and live the life you want to live. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that I'm still in a rental and I can't do what I want to do housing wise. Yeah. And it's okay. It'll all be all right. And I remind myself, there's that phrase, of course, this is happening to me, but it's happening for me. So, okay, this is happening for me. I'm not sure I see what it is exactly.
I hate that phrase so much. I agree with it, but I hate it.
Right. And then just reminding myself, there's lots of things I can do right now, and to not bother focusing on what I can't control. I don't think that I have traditionally been walking around like a crazy controlling person. That's probably what every controlling person says.
It is. As a fellow control freak, it is.
Yeah. I try. One thing I did learn in being married to my husband was I needed to just chill the fuck out and go with the flow, because we could never be on time for anything. Our trip, I would never set like an itinerary if we were traveling. It was like, we get there on this day and then we'll see what happens. So in those ways, that was great for me in that 20 years of learning to just chill out and not make a plan. But now that I thought I was going to be in control of my own life, I still can't make a fucking plan because I can't do anything. So that part of it's been difficult, but there's lots to still focus on. That's great. And just do right now. And that's what I'm trying to like keep my eye on, because there's moments where I can get pretty bitter and upset and fired up. Like I can be a little bit feisty sometimes. And there's things that come up in this that I'm like, fly off the handle about. And then it's like, that's not who you are. Calm down. And I think another thing in this is learning that control over anything is all just an illusion. There is no control over anything.
That was my first thought when you started to talk about the control aspect of things, right? And I think that, again, that's so relatable to hold those two thoughts simultaneously, right? Where it's like, I'm a control freak and I know that about myself, and I'm not going to not be an hour from now, but we don't have control over anything, right? It's like this crazy paradox.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm just trying to just kind of keep going and do great in what I'm doing right now, and try to keep a balance. I can lean in the direction of being a bit of a workaholic, and my real estate work, I do well in that. So I put my head down and do a lot of that. But then I'm also trying to edit a memoir, and turns out writing a memoir and editing a memoir are two totally different things.
Oh yeah. So
I wrote it in like a few months. It was great. I enjoyed it. Editing it, on the other hand, is like, I'm well over a year and it's taking me forever. And so I'm working right now to find some balance and put more time into that, because that's the like big, long-term, cool dream that I want to put out in the world, right?
I love that. Editing is literally the hardest part of, I would say, probably life, if we think about it, right? But one of the most important things I learned early on was, I heard this really interesting expression, kill your darlings. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression before, but
it's really,
it's basically the idea that everything that you think is amazing, you probably don't need it. Right? Just get rid of it and just make sure that you're focused on, I don't know if you have someone helping you, but does it flow? Does the story make sense? All the little intricacies that you think you're going to need, and the people, they're not going to appreciate them first and foremost. But it's, anyway, there's a lot of books around this. There's a lot of probably podcasts and stuff too, but it's like, everything that you think is amazing probably isn't. So take the substance of it and make sure that exists, and it'll be great.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
It's a perfect
Talk to me a bit about your memoir, because obviously you felt you needed to tell your story or wanted to tell your story. Who are you writing it for?
Oh, I am writing it I thought I was writing it for women who were in their like mid to late 20s up into maybe their late 40. And then a few weeks ago, my middle daughter, who was 15, we were sitting somewhere, and she's not a big phone kid, and she had nothing to do. And I was working on some editing, and I had a few printed pages.
Yeah.
And she'd put her phone away, and she was just sitting there bored, nothing to do. And so I handed her these few pages, and I said, here, I'm just a little bit older than you are in this part of my book. Why don't you read it? And she hasn't read any of it. My oldest daughter has read, and I've read to her a few parts as I've been working through, but my 15-year-old daughter, it might be a bit much for her. I realized afterwards. So she starts reading, and then a few minutes later, she turns to me and she goes, you were going out with someone who was 21 when you're 16? And I was like, oh, maybe I should take these pages. And she was like, no. And she kept reading. And later that evening, I had a chance, just the two of us, and I suspected she's a pretty straightforward kid. So if she found it boring, she would have been like, yeah, it's okay. She would have been mostly honest with me. But I asked her, and she said, Mom, I can't wait to read the rest of this. She goes, I was reading it and I kept thinking to myself, she said she would get like tears in her eyes and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to this person. Is this real? And then she would say to herself, oh my God, that's my mom. And she said, as she was reading it, she would forget it was me. she would feel like so much sympathy for the person that was going through all the craziness, and then have to again remind herself that it was me. And then also she's another few parts was reminding herself that this is someone's real story and it wasn't just wasn't just a random novel. So that made me go, oh, she said, she's mom, my friends would love to read a book like this. This is so interesting. So I don't know that it's really going to be meant for an audience of teenagers, but teenagers are reading some crazy stuff nowadays.
And I think there's a type of teenager that appreciates what someone else has gone through and that perspective it gives them as they navigate their life, right? I think about, I was a very introspective teenager, so I say it from that kind of perspective, right? And so I actually love that about your answer, because it's like you think that it's for one demographic. And that's how I feel about all art though, really. Whether it's writing, whether it's music, whether it's a podcast. I feel like this podcast has a particular demographic, but then I'll have someone say, oh, I listened to it as you did. Why did you listen?
Interesting. Yeah.
So, or not that you listened, but that something resonated, right? And I think that's what we're making art for. That's what we're making any type of content for. It's the hope that it will resonate with someone and change their perspective. So I love that was your answer.
Yeah. And I think I was listening recently to you chatting when you were talking with Lisa Nickel. And I was thinking about that idea of you can go through all the shit and you can do anything. You just keep going. And that is what that message is. Like what she was saying really resonated with me. Is that idea of if I can do this, you can do it. I promise you can do it. Just keep going. Don't give up. You'll be okay. Right. And so, it starts out, I started. So the crazy thing, how it came about was that I was working on writing something else. I'd done, like I said earlier, I'd done a lot of work on myself, and I was writing like a spiritual guidebook for the book. Was like a ways to kind of make contact with your higher self or whatever, just kind of some woo stuff. I was writing that. And I was writing in my bedroom, which I never normally did. I always wrote in my living room, and I was writing at night, which I never normally did. So just a weird one-off, writing in my bed. And I often write with my eyes closed. And so I'm typing. And so I'm just typing, because I learned quickly that you can't edit while you write or you'll never write anything, right? So I close my eyes and I disregard anything, typos or whatever. And I was just writing. I'm still working on this at this point, spiritual guidebook. And all of a sudden I have this like image and a thought that came to me that was just like this book is great, but this is not actually like this isn't what you're really going to share with the world. This isn't going to fit the thing that's going to like reach lots of people. And I was back and forth in my brain, like, what is that? What is this? Anyways, I opened my eyes and I happened to just be straight, making eye contact, if you will, with my pile of journals that I've had. I started journaling when I was 10 years old. And for whatever reason, I truly can't say why, all of my journals, I obviously put them there, were in my closet, stacked on the floor of my closet.
In that moment.
Why are they? Yeah, like why are they not in a box in the crawl space? I don't know. They're just maybe because I cherish them so much. They're like the key to my whole life. But they're sitting there in my closet. My closet's open. And when I opened my eyes from this thought, I was looking at my journals and I was like, oh, that's my story. And so within a couple of days, I just cracked open the first one. I was 10 years old when I started writing, and I just started transcribing and then adding in my so the great thing is anybody can write a memoir. Surely anyone can write a memoir. But the neat thing for me was that reading and then transcribing the journal entries would trigger things like some of that fear about my parents being found for drug use and stuff like that. Like that stuff, it was all there. And so I wrote it all out. And then I was getting to the point where I was getting together with my husband, and we were shortly a little while going to get pregnant, all that sort of stuff. But I realized the book was so long that it was going to be like I was writing like, I don't know, The Tale of Two Cities or whatever, some epic Gone with the Wind.
You're like, there will be a part 2.
Totally. And I was like, oh God, who's going to read this? This is too long. And my oldest daughter said to me, Mom, she goes, I don't mean to make myself the star of your story, Mom, but what if you end it when you get pregnant with me? She goes, and you can tie it all up, like all of this crazy stuff that's happening. And then I met this lovely guy and we get together and we're going to have a baby and live happily ever after. And then she says to me, because I had just I was only less than a month from telling my family that I'm about to change everything and we're getting a divorce.
Yeah.
And said to me, so you can write the first one up to this point, like as if everything is beautiful and wonderful. And she goes, and then you can start the next book that says, and now I'm getting a divorce. So anyway, so it's the story of me, and it's the kind of hope that I can inspire other women to just kind of keep going and keep trying, and everything will be okay and you can do anything.
If you could point to one belief about what your life was supposed to look like that you've had to release, what was it?
Oh, a word that I have definitely had to release was perfect. I just wanted it to all be perfect. But that goes back to that two-dimensional, my image. And it's funny you said late 30s, because from the time I was little, probably 10, I had this image of myself in my late 30s where I was married and I had kids and I was living in my perfect house and I had my dogs and I had a good job, something that I got dressed up for work every morning and made great breakfasts. And it was this image in my perfect kitchen. It was perfect. And then as I approached my later 30s and then surpassed my later 30s and got into my 40s, I was like, and I felt disappointed in myself. But then what I realized was that this was a two-dimensional image that I had in my head of what that was going to look like. And there's so much more to my life, and it's beautiful, but it's not perfect. No, nothing's perfect anyways. What the hell is that? But yeah, perfect.
Yeah. I mean, perfect. There's those of us that are perfectionists, right? That would definitely identify with that. What do you think has made you willing to let that go?
I think probably the realization that I'd be torturing myself if I kept trying for that. I think that just realizing there's no such thing for anybody. Like I said earlier, I just wanted, when I was younger, so badly to be normal. I didn't want to live in low-cost housing and have my mom on social assistance and my dad, God knows where, because he's in the throes of addiction in some other province, and we're just struggling and we fight all the time, my mom and I, and all that stuff. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be like one of those families with the kids and the house that the parents owned and the dogs, and they work and you go on vacations and do those things. And that normal helped me create this picture in my head that normal would also, and that I could make normal perfect. But oh my gosh, how ridiculous.
Or that your version of normal was perfect. Right. And I think that's the beauty in this story, is that in all of our stories, it's that perfect is what you create. I don't mean to sound too lofty or woo-woo, right? But it's like perfect is hopefully this moment, right? Where you just like everything around you is right now, it's kind of perfect. So take that for what you will. For someone listening who is navigating their own version of this, what do you wish that someone had told you, or what do you wish that you knew earlier?
That's a really good question. I think that if I could go back and start this over, if I was starting this over again, just this portion of it, of life, I probably would go to I'm the first of most of my friends to go through a divorce. Out of my close, like my friends have been my friends most of my life. All of my friends are still married to their husbands. And if there's one thing I would do, it would be to go back and to make sure that those friends knew that they needed to check in on me, and that what's being presented out to the world, what's on my social media, that's just the highlight reel, and that the biggest thing any woman needs through all of this, probably anyone, any man too, is support from their friends.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think too, I would say especially the people who are trying to show up on social media in that way, right? Because that's part of the perfect, right? And we all know that life is not perfect. And so when you see someone trying to show you perfection, it's, I don't know. So I think that was a beautiful commentary. What has you hopeful?
The spring real estate market has been very busy. So that has me hopeful. And my ex-husband is working on the things around the house that need for it to hit the market. So that has me hopeful too, because that will be a game changer. But overall in life, what has me hopeful, other than just like the right now in front of me things, I'm really hopeful about sharing my book with the world. I'm excited for that part, and to see if can get it out in the world in the way that I imagine for myself. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And like Vita said, there's no controlling anything. I have no idea, but I'm hopeful that even if it's not something that like makes me money or whatever, just that it's something that helps other women feel inspired and have that idea of like, wow, she came from this shit, and look at what she managed to do for herself in her life. And you can come from the shittiest shit. And if you just keep working and keep trying and doing your best, you'll probably get there. You just gotta steer yourself clear from probably drugs and alcohol are a big part of that, and just more shittiness, right? Steer your way towards things that are happy and focus on what you're working towards.
Mariah, thank you so much. This conversation, again, is like exactly the type of conversation I do this show for and I want to have here. So thank you so much for being just candid and honest, and I really, really appreciate it. Please let people know how they can connect with you and find your work.
Yeah. So speaking of that highlight reel on social media, you can find me at Mariah Inferny. And I've got a website that shares some cool stuff about my book and just life. It is mariahrunyons.com.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. Choosing to step off autopilot and think differently about your life takes work, and I don't take it lightly that you're here. If today's episode resonated, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And whenever you're ready to go deeper, whether through free worksheets, guided audio reflections, or one-on-one coaching, you can find everything over at thinkoutsideTheLines.com. Be well, and I'll catch you next time.